Okay, it is 7 o'clock, so can I welcome you all to the October meeting of the FES Committee. Are there any apologies? Jonathan? And everyone else is here. Item 3, the minutes of the September meeting. Would someone like to move them, second them, or are there any comments on them? Seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. Does anyone have any declarations of interest they need to declare? No, I take that as a no. Item 5, public forum. There are no public forum present, and I take it there are none logging in online. Moving on then, item 6, financial update.
Okay, so do we have any questions?
Just a few, if I may. So looking down, we're now at the end of September on these numbers, so therefore we're at the half year. If I look down some of those percentage budget spent, particularly in the top half, there's an awful lot there that aren't anywhere near 50%. I mean, obviously the Christmas lights is an easy one, but some of the ones with the actual spends are much less than half. And we've got a few commitments coming through, obviously, where we've agreed to do things and we know what we're doing in the second half of the year, etc. But I presume we're going to be heading towards potentially a surplus in the year, will we?
Yeah, potentially there will be a surplus, as there was last year. Obviously, because the pandemic has had an impact. We haven't done as much printing, etc., because we've not done events, and there's quite a few like that will pick up towards the end of the year, because we have got a couple of events planned, but it is likely that we won't spend the whole budget, so there should be some kind of deficit by the end of the year.
And I guess as well the view we took earlier in the year when we for example moved some costs from various events and the Blues, for example, in 2021, and we moved those up to other places like Primmett and Conan Bloom and whatever, we may well not spend those anyway. So we were prudent, but obviously that's now come back, which should help with the budgeting exercise for next year, I guess.
That's the hope, yeah. Definitely. We could do the surplus at the end of the year to obviously take away that deficit.
One other small question. I suppose if you've got the meeting on the 12th about a summer music festival, does that mean we remove the word blues from anything in 2022 onwards and call it summer music festival?
At the moment, we can't answer that because the full council decision was to not reinstate blues in its current form. What the council choose to do has yet to be decided. So it may be that it is still the blues. At the moment, it was just the minute was to not reinstate it in its current form for 2022.
Anyone else? Is that just your questions on A, David, or have you done A, B, and C? Right. That's fine. Any more comment? No more comments on either A, B, or C. All those in favour? Thank you. Item 7, Public Works Loan Town Hall Roof Replacement. We've got some figures which Gina will go through. At this stage, we don't have any quotes at all for the roof. It's a case of having some ballpark figures so we have some sort of a clue what it may cost. Obviously, whether we can afford to do it or not and how we do it would be down to, if we do go ahead with it, it would be down to the cost when they come in as to what we can afford. Gina?
Yeah, so at the last meeting, you wanted an indication of if we did have to get a loan for the roof replacement, what kind of effect it would have on the budget. Now, obviously, depending on the term that you take it over, that obviously affects your capital repayments and your interest payments throughout the year. The way that the Public Works Loan Board look at it, you pay they do it every 6 months, so you pay 2 lots of interest payments and your half of your yearly repayment twice a year. So it's obviously that makes your interest go down more that's because it's worked on what's left. For these figures, I decided to do it over, I kind of guess that the minimum term that we want to take it over will be 25 years, given that it's building related. Up to, I did increments of 5 years up to the maximum that you can do of 50 years. So this basically gives an indication of what you will see in the budget. So I've done 2 separate columns. One's for the 22-23 budget. The other one is for the following year's budget. So basically showing you that you have double the amount in the following year because you've got 2 repayments rather than just the one, which is the year that you take the loan out. Obviously, there's differences in your capital repayments and your interest. Not much in your interest because obviously interest rates are so low at the moment that it doesn't really make that much difference. So really what you need to look at is your capital repayments because that's the main impact on your budget. I did have a look into it and it did say that usually the majority, the maximum loan that any one council can get in a financial year is 500,000. And if you're wanting to borrow more than that, then this has to be negotiated beforehand. So we would have to think about that as well. Obviously, we haven't got a cost at the moment, but obviously when we have more of an indication, it could be that I've completely overestimated it. But obviously for budget purposes, you've got to go worst case scenario. But hopefully it will be less than that. But considering that if we are going to do it and we have got a full scaffold on the building, we would want to take advantage of that and do other projects at the same time. So it depends on the collective of how much we would need to borrow. Yeah, Naomi has a meeting on Thursday.
Yes, and I've already had 2.
With companies that can do the conditional surveys and can help us estimate what is required and how long it'll take, etc. They would, as part of the package that we're asking for, they would also help us with loan applications, etc. So we have got one quote and you're meeting with someone on Thursday to obtain another one, which should give us a bit of more indication of how much we're likely to need to borrow.
That's where the figures have originally come from that we're working to, from the 2 that have said an estimate would be in this sort of region.
When you say you've got, start again. When you meet this person, the people you are meeting on Thursday, are they going to do a full condition survey or just a?
They are looking at doing the full conditional survey to go through it because obviously we have done some other works internally as well. So the original conditional survey that we had done 5 to 6 years ago has some bits missing and So we are looking at that and looking to get it redone, so that, and the other bit is a maintenance plan for the building as well. So we didn't particularly get that with the original conditional survey, so it will tell us what we must do that's kind of not safe, what would be good to do to keep the longevity of the building, and what, if you had the money, would be lovely sort of thing. So getting a proper going forward maintenance programme of what this building as a heritage asset needs to maintain it.
A couple more questions. As not having the pleasure of actually looking at the roof, I take it that it's all in a pretty similar state all over it, so that there'd be no mileage, for want of a better word, of doing, you know, half of it or one slope or something now and then another, or are we better just doing the whole thing? And well, go on, answer that, and then I've got another question.
Okay, so we've done, with the insurance work we had to have done because the lead got stolen, and some gutter work that we had to do because we had a lot of water ingress that flooded 3 floors. The lead work on those areas will not need redoing. However, the honest answer is we haven't had any slate work particularly done, and it'd end up costing you more in scaffolding to do one elevation than the other, and it's not actually as secure. So what the intention would be a full top hat scaffold for it, because the shape of this roof is a bit odd. Kind of goes up and you have a dip in the middle. So when you try and cover it, the wind catches quite a lot because it's very windy up there, even on the stiller days. So from a health and safety point of view, to make sure the right scaffolding's up to combat the wind and all that, it starts getting, you'd be looking at 100 grand, 150 grand a year per small project for it.
The only reason I ask it that is that if over 500,000 we have to jump through more hoops, whether, again, with careful, I'm going to say with careful scheduling of the work, half of it could be done in one financial year and half in the other. But the difficulty there is that the financial year end is it'd be fine if it was July, because we wouldn't be guaranteed, but there's a fair chance that the weather either side of the year end would be conducive to doing the roof. The other thing, just the interest rate at the moment is at about just over 2%, give it a, yeah, fine.
So part of the issues have been caused with this is various patch repairs by previous owners of the building. So they might have done, say, that bit, but they've not then done the bit that leads into it. So the joins aren't brilliant, the felt's not joined properly. So because previous owners of the buildings have patch repaired, it's made it to the point where you're just going to be chasing your tail. You do one patch repair and another bit leaks.
Not a roof as nice as as complicated as this, but I have, by people in inverted commas penny pinching, been involved in where doing a part of it has just caused problems, and the thing was re-roofed in. All right, that was nice and easy is the wrong word. Simpler because it was a industrial roof. So, but
the cost-effective way for it going forward would be to do the whole lot, and while you've got the top hat scaffolding on, for example, your clock face has rust on the joins on it, so that could be repaired as well. You've got pointing out on chimneys, things like that. that actually, if you do them on their own, are exceptionally expensive to scaffold. But if you've got the scaffolding there in place anyway, you look at do the lot.
David?
Yes, the condition survey you refer to, it was done in 2017. I've got an extract of it, because it's a huge document, 388 pages, I believe. The town hall roof repairs were quoted at 355,000, which included re-roofing, renewal of flashings, and the comment from Paul Foxley, who I spoke to on this one as an expert, much of which has surely been done already. Chimney pointing, as you say, it's a good thing to do while you're up there. Renewal of valley gutters, etc. So if we think it's $1.5 million, hopefully not. Go on.
So I thought that when I was reading through the conditional survey, what I realised is they're priced the jobs if you're doing it in conjunction with other ones. So you'll find there's a price for the re-roof bit, but there's also a price for the pointing, the da-da. So the job as a whole actually ends up, because we said this, we were looking at it, and we got a quote for downspouts, cast iron ones, of something like 250 quid. And I sat there going, that's not right. And what we discovered is everything is broken into little sections. I could show you at the end if you want. So, because I had exactly the same conversation. I don't have the full conditional survey here, because I don't know whether that includes the scaffolding or any of that. I mean, the plans for the scaffolding alone, because they have to be done to a certain standard because of where we're located in the wind, you're looking at a few grand for that before you start. So it's that sort of thing is where we discovered it.
I also thought I'd better benchmark it as well against a real roofer. So we've got 2 roofers that we use at our house and various outbuildings and things. And I spoke to them and said, look, you know what the town hall looks like. What do you think? If you wanted a total re-roof, the whole thing, take all the slates off and you look at the battens and the felt and the insulation, all that kind of thing, then what would it cost? And he said, well, the scaffolding would be enormous, obviously. And he said, is it Westmoreland blue slate? And is it layered? So the taper, so it's small at the top and big at the bottom. Right, okay. So that's the thing that takes a bit more time and a bit more effort to take it all off in the right order and put them all back on again, etc. But one of the roofers gave me a quote and he said 100 grand. I said, well, I'll tell you what, if you quote that and you can do it to this spec or whatever, then brilliant. But I think all I'm saying, the general point is 355 or 100 or whatever number is like that. I think 1.5, we're sort of getting a bit anxious about a number that's totally unrealistic. I mean, what's the building worth as a whole?
The other bit, if that roofer would like to come and quote and look at it, I'm more than happy, because if I can get it for less, we'd definitely be. But it's not just an up roof, it's an up and a down on 4 sides. So I wasn't sure whether the roofers, because when you look on the outside, it looks really straightforward. So, but like I say, we are going for multiple quotes to get it looked at properly. So this isn't a figure that I've just looked.
Approaching new surveyors for condition reports, or are we going to go back to the one that did it 4 years ago?
Looking at both, but at the moment we are looking for possible new one, because there are some bits in the survey that are just not right.
I would suggest really you have the extra meetings, we get some idea of it, and therefore we don't tie ourselves up in knots thinking it's $1.5 million, or do huge calculations with very large numbers that undermine the budget for next year and beyond. And we park the decision until we get some more information, really.
I believe this was just a report for information only anyway. It wasn't a decision making.
It is, and I'll probably be wrong if I take a wild guess, but I would expect it to come back somewhere around about $500,000. That's what I would expect it to come back at, and I might be totally wrong, and I don't think any of us have a real clue. And I think the answer is to get out there and get three prices, and then we know what we're looking at, don't we? So I think we've got to do that, and we've got to do that sooner rather than later, so that we know what we're working to and we can put some proper figures on the sheets. And then we can decide, because I think the loan will be a lot less than what we're anticipating. I'll be very disappointed if it isn't. I don't know whether any of you have, probably not, been up on roof or had a look at some proper photographs of the roof, but it's very similar. If you imagine four blocks of terraced houses with the roof, you know, the apex of the roof like that, it's like four of them laid out in a square. So there's the slates up on the outside, then they come back down on the inside, then there's the flat bit where the windows are, and then it goes back up again at the other sides. So in a nutshell, if you block the gutters, it in theory would fill up with water about 10 foot deep, because it's all boxed in. So there's slates on inside and slates on outside. I would have imagined if you did have to do it over 2 sessions, rather than having a lot of jointing work, I think you'd possibly, the only way you could split it, so you don't have a load of sort of patchwork joints on it, which are prone to leaks later anyway, would be to do all the outside, and then at some point shortly after, possibly the year after, is to take the ridge tiles off and then do the inside. And then your joints only on the ridge tile, which would seal both sides when you put it back on. But I'm no expert in it, but I would imagine it's more like £500,000 rather than the million. But we don't know until we get the figures. So I would suggest that we get the figures.
The other bit that's included in this that we're looking at is the roof on top of the clock tower, just to make you aware, because that has water ingress, which is nicely dripping onto your wooden beams, which are now getting lovely little marks where it's wearing. So, and that's something we don't want to have to deal with, replacing those wooden beams. So it is literally from the bottom up, well, probably paint the flagpole while you're up there the whole way down, just as that's what I'm asking them to look at.
Anyone else? No. So, what progress are we going to go for then? You're going to get.
I'll have to get the conditional survey quotes first.
Yeah, get the conditional survey quotes first. Yeah, and then we want to get around to getting a price for having the work done, and then. How do we want to go about bringing it back? Do we want it to come back for an update every month or every 2 months? What do you want to do with it?
I would suggest probably we put it on the agenda for next time and we just keep bringing it back, really, because obviously, as you say, it's a fairly hot topic.
If there's nothing to report, there's nothing to report then, isn't there?
No, exactly.
Maintenance is a standing item, so it can just come under that.
Yeah.
You can come under that.
Until we need an actual.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because then, of course, it'll feed into the budget as well, which we got our first draft for later on, so we'll keep on iterating that one as well.
Yeah. I would rather do it that way. And then if there is no report, there's no report. But we don't want to have it not on the agenda, and then there is a report, and then someone says it's not on the agenda. So I'd rather have it on the agenda, and if there's nothing to report, we just go straight through it. Okay. So we'll take that course of action then. Right. Item 8. 2022/23 budget first draft.
Right, yeah, as it says, it is just a first draft. Basically, I've included in it things that have come to the fore from other committees, things that have been said that we would like to do. Just as an indication of if we did do it, what effect it would have on the budget. So I've included everything. I've also included the loan, but I've done it on the 50-year basis, which has the smallest impact on the budget, just to show you the impact that it does have on the budget. Other than that, I've tried to reduce things where I can. The main blues budget has been taken out and replaced by £20,000 as per full council resolution in the last meeting. So we know where we're looking at with that. Obviously, until next week's meeting and the following full council, we won't actually know what the decision is for the event. So obviously that will have another impact on the budget as well. I've tried to list all the things that are contributing to the increase in the budget. So I've tried my best to point them out so that it is easier to look at. And I've also pointed out the things that I've taken off. The main thing to note is probably that we did carry forward 170,000 from last year's budget, which will be obviously skewing the figures slightly because we've obviously added that to this year's budget to obviously help fund things like the Coaling Bloom and Permit, and obviously reallocated funds because we haven't done events to these areas. So you have your statutory services, which obviously do add to the budget. You do have that, but because we carried a lot forward, it wasn't as noticeable. Yeah, obviously going forward, you still have that cost. And if you add your events back in, that's kind of where your deficit comes in. So, first thoughts.
Sorry, are we all trying to press buttons? Sorry. A question first of all, what's the why are some in blue and some in yellow? Or is the blue the statutory bits and the yellow the bits that have changed, or?
The yellow is based on more detailed breakdowns that I've done because they're on insurance costs, utility prices, which I know more about what we've used, what the rates are, etc. So they're more accurate predictions. So they're all in yellow because they're pulled from a different spreadsheet in the budget model that I have. The ones in blue are the grounds maintenance, so can't be reduced basically. So we're in a contract.
Right, so mine's only just about the events, because I know if it hasn't happened this year, so we've had no events this year apart from looking forward to Christmas. My only thoughts were, for next year's budget, should we not have more money in to do more for Colne? Do you know, I know like we're reinventing the blues, is that the right word to use? Reinventing the blues, which I understand I know it's a different budget, but I just think for 1 year for the Colne people to just have more interaction for it.
You could do, but it would add to your deficit.
So the events committee have done a provisional budget based on the events for next year, which is where this is fed in from, and including an extra event for the Jubilee, they believe they can bring it in within that budget. So that's what they're estimating, if that helps at all. What now?
I suppose in a way I'm looking at it from, if we stand back, first of all, one point you might want to change is where you've got the summary page, the very first column there is the original budget, which as we all know is out of date. So I would suggest, I don't know whether I was going to go for this one, whether we go, if you go back to item 5 or 6 on the agenda or whatever, where we've got the current budget, and therefore that's a more realistic comparison of what we thought the year really is, and we're still in it, and therefore you get a better comparison. Because if I look down here, for example, I see things like, Primet is in there at 29, and it jumped suddenly to 41 and down to 34, and I'm thinking, well, was the 29 real? No, it's 46 according to the current budget. So, it makes it slightly easier to compare when there's trends coming through there, that we're comparing to what is our current budget as opposed to our out-of-date budget.
I can actually answer that because on the summary, what I'm looking at is the preset figures. So obviously the preset figure last year, that's what we had, that's what the income that we got. And comparing that to the following years. So I have to, in order to show that precept, I have to put that original budget in, because it all works out.
No, I mean, the precept, you say, that hasn't changed, it starts at 6 to 8. So about future years.
No, because I'm comparing the precept for next year to what we got this year. So I have to give you the balanced budget that we said for that precept.
Yeah.
So that's what's there. And then obviously I'm trying to put a balanced budget in next year, but the precept is obviously goes up higher because.
Yes, I think in a way, you've sort of proved my point there, because as you say, we got 628,000. Our original budget said 634. So we got 628. So that's the actual figures that we will have in our latest budget. So that total there should come to 700 rather than 784, because obviously we've not done the blues. So therefore we should take out the 84 for the blues, for example. So it's just a suggestion. I think it just makes it so it compares better with current year latest budget with the 3 years we're looking at in the future. So that's one suggestion.
But the current year's budget isn't balanced because we carried a lot forward.
I just wanted to ask, I'm just asking on this one, isn't this also what we have to give the variance to the auditor for from our original submitted budget? So if there's any variance, like you've said about the blues, we have to literally line by line explain them to the auditor, which is, I think, why we're supposed to base it on those figures. But I'm looking at Gina to correct me if I'm wrong on that one. I just know we have to do the variance.
Sorry. Yeah, no, that is right for auditing purposes. I mean, what I can do, I mean, the way the spreadsheet is worked out, the figures put in and it gives you the precept at the top by taking away the income and adding the expenditure, etc. What I can do is do an additional spreadsheet which compares start of year budget to current budget, and then so it would just be an additional spreadsheet basically.
Okay, so that was one thing that I was going through. I thought to myself, what's my budget? Is this going up or going down, or what is it one comparing against? I suppose the overall concern I've got, I think Emma's touched on it a bit in terms of things like events, whatever. You know, I'm a precept payer. What am I paying for? Especially if we've got a potential increase in the precept of this kind of level. So it's almost like the sort of priorities. I mean, we've taken on things like Alkincoats Park, and it's going to cost us about 100,000 a year. So we have an absolutely lovely park, well maintained, well looked after, and everything. Let's have more parties in it. Let's have more events in it, etc. You know, so it encourages people to go. We take on the Primmett Community Centre, for example. It was run by a community group. We've taken it on. We've taken on the maintenance. We've made it look nice, etc. And yet somehow we're sort of banking on spending 35 to 40,000 a year on it and getting not a lot of revenue for it. So, you know, it's just an extra cost. We're not, you know, a community centre like Trawden, for example, makes a profit. You know, they're self-sustaining assets, these things. And as a council, I think if we take something on, we need to make it so that it actually does a bit more of that, rather than just soak up the precept and things like that. The vast majority of people in Cone don't use the Primmett Community Centre. Cone in Bloom, again, costs spiralling on that one. And I'm concerned again that we're not enhancing the revenue, really, the sponsorship, the fees we charge the shops, etc. So it's those sorts of things where we're spending money on those kind of things that things like admin or council governance. What does council governance mean to a precept payer? You know, there's a lot of salaries in there. So, you know, what are they getting for that? I think that's the key thing is the overall focus in terms of what are they getting for it, and if we are going to ask for a precept increase when all the dust settles around the numbers, etc., then, you know, we've got to sell it to the taxpayer, haven't we?
Yes.
Before Naomi comes in, to try and compare the Primmett Community Centre to the Trawden Community Centre is a bit apples and pears, or the two are not similar in any way, shape or form. And you could make the same argument that I'm a council taxpayer, but I don't use schools because my children don't go to school now, so I pay for that. There are lots of things that councils provide that some council taxpayers don't directly benefit from in that, you know, not everybody goes to the gym, not everybody goes to the swimming pool, not everybody goes to Elkin Courts Park, not everybody goes to Brimmet Community Centre. What we have to look at is a balance of things across the board, and we are not, you know, in inverted commas, a business. So when we don't need to sweat Brimmet Community Centre to make the best money out of it. I've seen adverts for people that are in there. One of the people that are in there, maybe twice a week or once a week, I forget what they call themselves, but it's to do with helping mothers breastfeed, for instance, which, should we be making money out of something like that? Not really, but we charge a cost to cover, excuse me, that covers that bit of the cost when they're in there. The budget stands at the moment, it's a 20% rise, give or take. And what we have to do is, as Gina said, is compare what we get from the precept. And last year we got 628,000. And we had the bit left over from 1920. So that's the figure we have to compare, not what it is now and what have you. Clearly, at the moment, that's far too big a rise to do. I think I worked out that it was somewhere about £26 a year for a Band D property. A very rough figure. So what we need to do are look through, or the committees that are asking for the extra money, you know, events have got to look at it and say, well, can we really do this within the budget, or can we save a bit here, can we save a bit there? There's the one-off cost of, is it a platinum jubilee? What? So, you know, there are things like that. The Christmas event this year is probably going to be a bit more expensive than last year because it's got the full road closure and so on and so forth. But this is the first pass on this. But to think that we should be sweating every, you know, should we have a wedding in here every week and every this and every, it doesn't really matter if not. If we get the weddings in here and they bring in income, it helps offset some of that cost. We have a duty to keep this building in a good state of repair, because if it was to fall down or become unusable, God help us, I think we'd be lynched. People are complaining. I mean, we can't win with the town hall clocks. People are now complaining that it's not bonging, and some people are saying, "Oh, it's very good. You know, it's not bonging. It's not keeping me awake." So, whatever we do, it's always a balancing act, and we're not a commercial business. We've got to what we have to do are things for the good of the people of Colne. And if that means putting on an event here and there, well, that's what we have to do. If it means we've got, say, a scout group that has nowhere to meet and they want to use Primmett and they can't really afford to do it if we charge them the commercial rate, but they can do it if we charge them a non-commercial rate, we charge them the non-commercial rate because that's the business we're in. Having said that, as I said before, 20% is a rise that we can't really justify, so we've got to look at that. But first pass, we've 2 or 3 months before we have to make the final decision, probably 2 in reality. So we need to look at it and see. And with the best will in the world, we've only had it a couple of days to look through everything. So we need to go away, look at it, and see where the priorities are.
So just to follow up on that then, obviously, as you say, we're not a commercial business. However, if you want to do the precept of less than 20% increase, which is unpalatable, then either your costs come down or your revenue goes up. Simple as that. So, if you're looking for revenue opportunities, be they weddings or hiring out buildings or facilities, etc., that's a way to make money from the things that we are lovingly restoring and nurturing and looking after, be they parks, buildings, the town hall, etc. If we're going to cut some costs, we need to focus on some of the things that have gone in there in order to either boost the spending this year or which are earmarked for next year. Here's 1 or 2, for example. F, 30,000 for CCTV in Waterside. What's that?
So one of the aims of the councils was to get their assets covered because we're having a lot of vandalism. It's the Waterside play area in Mugger that is having, I'd probably say, twice a month vandalism, quite substantial things, which are therefore costing the money. So it's investing in additional CCTV to cover that area.
Similar to what we did last year with King George's. Yeah.
So if you think about it, of course, what we've now got, if you look at the CCTV cost line, we're up into the 40,000s there already, you see. So therefore, it's one of those things that's becoming a big cost. I mean, if we think that the council budget is going to be around about, say, 700,000 or 750,000 in total, we're spending a decent proportion on CCTV for muggers. And if we're happy with that, then that's what we're going to do.
The other bit with the CCTV is obviously the system has grown over double in the last 18 months, 2 years, with additional cameras going in the next month. That isn't free to manage them, to maintain them. So the contract we have for the management of them, as in the updates, the sorting them out if they go down sort of thing, the labour costs and all that are increased with that too. So the expanding system, which is brilliant for Colne, and it is regularly used by the police, as well as various other people insurance companies, the cost goes up. So the more you add to it, the more it costs to maintain it. I mean, your staff do the searches and everything for free within their normal working role. So you are saving there, but it is one of those that the more cameras you add in, and the council wanted to go into to take on the additional for the bid as well. So again, that increases the maintenance cost. So that could be partly hike as well, if that helps.
I think it's one of those ones, as we make decisions, what we're doing is we're committing more money for the future to be spent in those areas. I mean, if you take staffing, for example, we're going to add an extra half a lensman to make him full-time, and that'll give us a total complement of 7 staff, which if you look across the various budgets comes to £157,000. So again, that's a big ramping up in recent years about what we're doing, how we're doing it, etc. So we need to make sure that we're using all those resources. If we've got them, what are we using them all for? So that's the key on that sort of thing. Couple of little detailed ones, by the way. In B, we talk about the fencing. Is it? We see. Is that 20,000 one-off? Because it seems to be in all 3 years. Are we doing the fencing, or are we doing the fencing every year for 3 years?
No, that actually would be,
It's a capital
one-off.
thing, it's a one-off.
yeah, it is a one-off cost for next year. I've probably just not taken the,
I think we touched on the one about the blue amounts of the grounds maintenance things. So we do have an element of variability in that, though. I know there's a fixed cost element to it, but presumably we've got a variable bit to it as well. So again, we might have some flexibility there if we think about how they operate.
What I am trying to do, and Gina and Naomi are trying to do with the grounds maintenance thing, where you said some of it's a fixed cost because we've got a contract. Some of it is work that it's sort of ad hoc work that happens now and then. What we are trying to do is to ensure that a lot of that work now, rather than contracting it out, goes to our our two lensmen, and they do it, which is a saving, obviously,
Absolutely,
because
yeah.
their salary's
Yeah.
less than contracting it out. So hopefully, in a sense, the lensman, it will save us money rather than cost us money.
They are doing all that.
Yeah, well, yes, they are.
Okay.
One thing I would say is with this budget now, I think everyone has realised that without putting a large precept increase on, what we have down in the budget, which you could call a wish list of a budget, what we would like to do on it in an ideal world, there is quite a deficit, which would mean the precept going up. And I think we've got to treat it as some of it as a wish list at the moment. Some things we could reduce, some we can't, because anything we've got a contract for, if we reduce it, we'd probably get a penalty on contract anyway, so we wouldn't gain much. So I think we've got to treat it as a wish list, and I think we've seriously got to get some of these items to full council where we can have a discussion and involve more people, because some of these things are in different people's areas, and they are things that some members are more passionate about than others. So I think we need to have the discussion, and we need to see what we can get some of these figures down to, where we can sort of budget it differently, and then we'll have to then look at the figure, what we would need to increase the precept by, to tide us over, and then we'd have to make the decision whether we thought that precept increase would be palatable to the public out there or not. Just going back to the two figures you mentioned of the 628 for the precept and the 634, I take it that 6,000 is the amount that we lost when it dropped because of the drop in the base rate. Equal, and that was on half a year, because from the first lockdown it was half a year to when the figures were calculated in October last year. I am equally certain that there will be a similar drop in the current year, and that will be for a whole year. So I would guess that this year it could drop the 6,000 plus another 12. So I think it could go down 18. That affects as budget as well, because it affects as income, because unlike a company, we get as income once a year, and whatever we set the precept, that's it, we get it all on one day, one payment, everything's there at bank. And that's why sometimes over the year we think, oh, we've loads and loads of money in bank, but it's got to last us a year because there's no more income. So we've got to bring that figure into it as well. And perhaps I could ask David where in his hat that he now wears budgetary wise at Pendle, to once he gets wind of what the base rate is going to drop this year, if it's going to drop, if he could let us know so that we could prepare for it.
Yep.
Last year, I probably asked Dean Langton half a dozen times before he had eventually got the figure worked out and gave it to her. But the sooner we can get it,
Yes.
if you can get your hands on it, that will be helpful.
Okay, I shall ask.
Take down now, because you're going to bring it back, I think, whether you want to reduce the grant budget or if there's some that you think could be reduced down, because it'll give Gina a chance then to bring you a second draft. That's something. So, I mean, your grant budget went up from 2.5 grand to 10. You could meet in the middle and put it at 5 or something. It would give you a start on your second. Sorry.
I think, although it's not Howard's favourite word, but sort of sweating some of the charges we give out to people. I notice, for example, in the allotment section, allotment income remains exactly the same year on year on year. Is that the policy?
The allotment rent went up last year. Was it the year before? The year before. So it has had an increase about 2 years ago. That's up to the council, but I think they wanted to try and maintain it as much as they could. There is different rent levels as well if you're a resident and if you're not.
The rents from the allotments, in a sense, it's disastrous how it works. Usually the allotment committee's decided what they want to do. And then another factor with it is if you decide to put an allotment increase on, which probably wouldn't work out at a lot anyway, because the income from the allotments isn't a lot anyway. But if you do put an increase on, it takes ages to get the increase, because before you've got to give a full year's notice prior to the financial year that it's going to go up in. So if you want an increase now, you'd have to give a year's notice. So I don't think you would actually be able to bring the increase in until the 2023-4 year. Yeah. And I keep telling them that they need to get their act together and put the notices in, because it's no good finding out in another 6 months that allotments budget's overspending and they need to do this work and they need to do this work. They need to prepare for it a full year before because of having to give this notice. It's just a load of red tape how it works.
Allotments have been told if they want to put rent or anything, they need to let yourself speak. They need to put a report from.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Allotments have been told if they want to put the rent up, they need to put a request or a report into FES, because it has financial implications. Because it could also be that it goes the other way and you get a lot of people giving up their allotments because they find they're too expensive. So, but I have had that conversation.
One other question for you. On the town hall, obviously that's where we got the 1.5 million coming in, with it being down there on the bottom right in the summary there. If we borrow 1.5, why does it jump to 1,705? Because in the breakdown, it's got repairs and maintenance of 30 grand per year, so 30, 30 and 30, and in the 1 year next year it says 1,580. Which implies an extra 1,550. So if somebody got an extra 50,000 in the repair and maintenance section, which isn't matched by the income of 1.5.
It's probably to go for the general maintenance of the building. Obviously, we don't just have to do roof repairs.
You have somebody to spend 50 down.
We usually put 30,000 in, for the town hall. And then obviously we have, I think there was a sum of 18,000, which I think was,
So for the capital borrowing, we would get a consultant to do it, to work with us to do the conditional survey. We have had a provisional quote for that of 18 grand, which is where your extra 20 in that is, because they can then do the conditional survey, because you couldn't borrow. You'd need the conditional survey to back up your borrowing.
If you capitalise a fixed asset, you include all the professional fees at the same time as well. So that would be part of the overall borrowing, I would suggest, but.
Sorry. We'd need to lay it out though before, and there would always be the chance that you don't get the loan. So it sounds, I suppose, a bit strange, but we have to presume worst case scenario when doing the budgets. Because if not, we're 20 grand short somewhere. So that's why that's in there like that. And then it might be that the following year you have an underspend because of it.
I know what David's saying, and he's right, we could capitalise it, which is similar to what we did with the room downstairs. If you remember, a lot of the extra work we had on the room downstairs, when we took the loan out for the play areas, we capitalised the work we had done on the room downstairs and got the loan back for that, and then got the money to put back into the accounts, if you remember, with that. So yes, it can be capitalised, and it probably should be.
there is also a provisional cost put in there for replacing the boilers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of unknowns in there, because we don't know how much the precept's going to drop because of the base rate. At this stage, we don't know whether the roof's going to cost us half as much as we were anticipating. And if we do, there's about 20 grand. If the roof only costs us half what we're expecting, there's 20 grand a year there, isn't there? So there's a lot of unknowns there. But I do think we need to go through it and say, well, we'll want to do that, we'll want to do that, and then we might have to pick which service areas and which budget items get priority. And all of us sit down together and have a discussion.
I mean, the one thing I'd say, I mean, it's one of those things, you pick the example of grants being 10 grand up from 2.5, say. Again, we're looking at a smallish number in the accounts as a whole, the budget as a whole. Events has been a sort of net 20 grand. So trying to chop something there or, you know, cut back here is peanuts again. And you're hurting the precept there again, aren't you? But I think, as you say, David, there's plenty of sort of areas there where we could try to focus on, or could phase whatever it is we want to do over a longer period of time. So, you know, it takes a 3-year view rather than just a 1-year view.
There will be an underspend, no doubt, like there was last year. But the trouble is with the underspend, well, let me go back to precept amount. The precept amount you get every year. So you know that's coming in every year. If you top the budget up with too much of your underspend from the year before, so to taking it out of capital, once you've spent it, you can't spend it again. No. So when you come round to the budget next year, you can't top it up with the same money you've topped it up before, because you've already spent it.
Yeah. It's true.
Really, the underspend wants using on one-off things so that it doesn't mess the budget up year on year. And if you use the underspend to spend in a capital sort of capacity and use it as a capital project for one-off things, and then you're not messing your revenue budget up.
Yeah, like the boilers, for example.
Yeah, you could use the underspend to finance paying for boilers and things, because it's a one-off payment.
Yeah.
And the reason why I wanted to go for a loan for the roof work is this building's approaching 130 years old. The roof's lasted 130 years. So if we do the roof now and we do it properly, it will probably last another 100 years. So I think the cost of it should be spread out over several years, rather than everyone who's here in this decade and this generation pays for all of the roof paying for the next 100 years on the town hall. I think it spreads it over a longer period, so more people actually pay towards it.
Yeah. One good thing as well to put in context is, I think in your paper, Jean, you took in paragraph 4 there about the reserves position, obviously, that we expect to carry forward into the future year 537. Now, obviously, we brought forward the 716 that we were budgeting based on the figures we discussed earlier for a 178 loss. Now, of course, if we then say, well, we're not spending that, we're not spending this won't happen, etc., and that 178 loss becomes a break even or even a small surplus, then we'll have 716 plus thousand in our reserves, which we can revisit our earmarked reserves policy, etc., look at the sort of things we want to think about there, whether we call something boilers or we call something else. Then we've got a chance to be able to use that and again invest and support the budget for these sorts of projects.
Yes, and if there is a large underspend this year, we could put that back into budget at the outturn and leave that in a capital pot, and that could be a capital contribution towards having, say, for argument's sake, the roof done and borrow less money.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we also earmark things like community development funds. So the idea of using it for grants or using it for some sort of other projects or investment into, the groups that, even supporting the Scouts and giving them a half-price rental, for example. Those kind of things are the sorts of projects where that is community development. And that's what, we can use as a broad pot to support the entire population of Cone.
See, on the roof work, I haven't got the exact figure in front of me. Gina might have it, I don't know. I have had it once, but each payment you make half yearly, the amount you pay goes down. So I think it goes down, is it about 2,000 a year it goes down? It goes down a lot. It's a fair bit, isn't it? Yeah, as the amount is going down, so you start off at the highest payment, in 20 years you'll be paying less, and in 40 years you'll be paying even less. And if you think about it, it might seem a lot of money now to borrow it, but the people that are paying sat here in 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, the figure then will be like things have changed in the last 30 years. That figure will be a lot smaller figure in comparison to day-to-day costs, won't it? So in the whole bigger picture, it will be going down.
One other thing that's not included, not printed here, is a potential transfer of assets and services, putting another hat on. So later in October, what we want to try to do, we're gathering some of the information at Pendle level about the cost centres and the revenue streams and the cost streams, etc., for all the sorts of various assets that were on the list. Things like the Mooney, for example, is already having some work done on its roof. There's the levelling up bid, hopefully going to be announced later on this month as well. So hopefully Cone will get a big investment in the Mooney and other locations there. So therefore, if the town council is interested in taking on the Mooney, it will be in tip-top condition. And you're also looking at other things like car parks and other bits of, we've done very well in taking parks and playgrounds and those sorts of things, so we're ahead of the game on those. But yeah, that's another one to bear in mind in terms of how the budget may move depending on those discussions.
Yeah, I don't think, in all honesty, any of them will affect next year's budget, because you know how long it takes Pendle to transfer anything.
Yeah.
They're talking about it now, they'll still be talking about it at Christmas, and if it's, even when we agreed to take this building on, I think from starting talking about taking this building on, it took about 3 years before it actually transferred.
Yeah, that's not good
so
enough.
So there's certainly not going to happen.
Not good enough.
It's certainly not going to happen in next year's budget. I think it'll be another budget beyond that.
I'm hoping with a new CEO and a new CFO starting next month, then there might be a bit of energy behind such things.
Well, you might.
Just want to check this, because Gina will need to bring a second draft of this budget to the November FES, won't you? with a look for it to then go to full council in November for the final decision in December. Is that correct, for the precept amount? Because we normally submit it, yeah, we submit it very beginning of January. So just to give you an idea of
Yeah.
timings.
The December full council budget item, technically, so that we can get all the paperwork in time, because we've got to send the preset figure we require for next year into Pendle. We need to make the decision in December, at the December meeting. How we want to pan it out between now and then, that's up to us, but we've got to make the decision then. And usually we get the preset figure from Pendle in late November or early December for the base rate.
I will say though, obviously, as the time goes on, we get more of an idea of costs, figures, and like David said, having the lensman will save us money, but at the moment it's too early to quantify what that is, given that they've only just finished the watering. So they've only actually just started doing the other work. So as that pans out, obviously we can make more of an estimate of savings from that as well. So it's...
Yeah. but there is some work in the grounds maintenance contract, and it's costed on an hourly cost basis as an as and when it's required, and those are the jobs we're trying to pull in house. And now is the ideal time to do them, because they're not doing the watering and other things. And if we can get it done for 15 quid an hour, why pay 30? And as I've said before at previous meetings, we need to save as much as we can on them sort of costs, because it's not our money we're spending. So we've got to get the best value for it.
So how are we going to play this between now and the next iteration then?
Depends if anyone's moving anything.
Are we going to challenge the various committees to have a rethink on their little sections? No, well, I think the events can stay where it is, to be honest. It should be double, in my opinion.
I'm only defending for Nathan, for our events officer there, going, he's come up with a budget, and I have checked it as well.
Have the events committee had a meeting where they have sort of properly discussed their budget requirements?
Yes, well, a budget was proposed to them at the last events meeting, which they were happy with. So I believe Gina's seen that, and it's worked into this budget,
Right.
and that will be coming probably next month to yourselves for approval. But it's kind of chicken and egg. The budget they've proposed has been fed into your draft budget.
Yeah.
So if the draft ends up being approved, so's their budget. So we wouldn't normally bring it as a separate item once it had been fed into that.
So at the moment, the figure in Gina's sheet is the figure that the events committee have requested. Yes. Right.
Having a positive thought that they're going to get lots of income and sponsorship and all that. So what they'll actually spend on events, as you'll see from previous years, is nearer the 35 mark. So you know how you're saying about doing more? That's only what they get from precept contribution. The rest is done on sponsorship, income, and all that. So yeah, that's the way the events work. They get a pot from you, and if they want more, they have to find it somewhere else. And so far, they've not done too badly.
Then we can go back to people like the allotments committee as well. There's another one to potentially look for. Don't know. Anyway, that's one. Then we've also got potentially firming up on the town hall and the roof. So we'll have some of that. We have an idea of what the boilers will cost potentially. We've got a couple of unknowns, transfer of services, and whatever happens at the Blues revisit meeting next week. Are you after us just to make extra suggestions? If not now, then by email or list or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the boiler work isn't a recurring thing anyway. That's a capital item just for well, it'll either be 1 year or 2, won't it? Because it depends. Depends when we need to get the boilers done and when we can get them booked in and have them done, because it might end up with the work being round about April, March. So some of it could fall in 1 year and some of it fall in another. But it will only be one. It won't be a recurring expense. It'll be sort of a one-off job.
Could I make a request on Gina's behalf that any feedback on it she gets within the next fortnight, because this is not a little task for her, and if she can get them at least with a week to go, ideally within the next week, I think she'd say, but it is one of those that gives her a chance to get the reports done in advance and to yourselves. Is that okay, Gina? Sorry, David, just if we can request that. Is that okay?
Does anyone want anything else adding or removing?
No, I was toying with the idea of whether we ought to send this to all the other members of the council and say that's the budget that. That's not the, rephrase that. That's the draft budget. Yeah. Well, that's why I'm not. Maybe a general email that says, you know, we're at budget, or are we asking for trouble?
I think there is a danger of people who are possibly not on this committee, who may look at it and rightly or wrongly automatically assume that that is what is in that budget for that thing, and there's nothing definite yet because we haven't got that full amount. So you know what I mean?
In my opinion, there's a reason why you have a finance committee.
But I do think at full council we're going to have to try and come to some decisions on some of these. You know, which members feel are a priority, and that must be left in the budget. And as we've already said, there are some things like things we've got contracts for, it can't be changed until the contract runs out, and then it could be changed, couldn't it? The only trouble is with most of them, they're a 4 or 5 year contract, and inevitably the next time you get a contract on it, it's probably going to go up rather than down anyway, on most of them.
Get some feedback over the next week.
Move we note the report.
And feedback sent to the RFO.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
As soon as possible.
Yeah. Right. Right, so item 9, Community Saver, Skipton Building Society. I hope this doesn't mean more signatures.
No, we've already done that part. No, it's basically to say that the account is now open, and they are now waiting for us to transfer a balance into that account. And this is basically just to find out how much you want to put in that account. We did originally say, based on, well, given that it's a community saver, I would probably suggest we start with the community development earmark reserve. I've also made some notes and added on to that the playground reserve. the Park Reserve and Primmett Community Centre. That all totals 265,000. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, we have it separate in the budget anyway. But it's just, any ideas? At the moment, obviously, trying to open bank accounts is an absolute nightmare. It's taken that long to open the one at Skipton. But it is offering quite a better rate than we have with our existing savings account. So until we then get another open and then we can split between three, yeah. So it's how much you want to put in there, basically. It's 0.05 versus 0.01. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Which 5 times as much. 5 times nothing, still nothing though, isn't it?
Well, I moved the suggested 265,000. That seems a reasonable start.
If we're not going to need it for the foreseeable future, and that's where basically reserves fall into that category, I think we should put it in there. Well, can I suggest we do what has been moved and seconded, and put that in there, and then depending on what the outturn is when we get nearer to end of year, and we know what his budget is then for next year, and we know how much of that we're going to use to help top the budget up, that some of the remainder again can possibly go in there as well, until such time as we need it.
Keep it under review.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? Do we have any accounts with Yorkshire Bank?
No.
No. And if we did, we'd have to go a lot further than Nelson now.
I don't think they actually do an account for a council.
Right, that's that one finalised. Item 10, Millennium Green Trust Stools. Yes, you can do.
The Millennium Green Trust have gone for some funding for some tools for them, and they've asked if they can be stored in one of our garages at Primmett. There is some concern on this, giving more people access to them, invalidating, they'd have to have their own insurance on the items, and whether insurance companies would insure something held on someone else's property with another group having access. So that's why it's come to committee. Because I'm not sure how or if it would work because if you store tools in garages, they are renowned for getting broken into. But the request came, so it's brought to council.
Tools are we actually talking about?
At the moment, we're not quite sure because they haven't got them. It might just be spades and things. However, they haven't got them yet, so we don't know. We also don't know how many or anything like that.
Well, in that case, we can't do anything until we know what, why, where and when.
I think I would say as a general principle, we should really say no. Yes, because you say, it's a few tools, a few spades now, but what's it going to be, a ride on mower next or whatever? We've had enough discussions with the Millennium Green Trust about their assets versus our assets in the past. If we want to rent out space and it covers our variance in our insurance, then fine, that's a commercial deal. But yeah, I would suggest we don't do it unless they're prepared to pay and it's happy with our insurance.
So you'd like me to go away and investigate further? Yeah, that's fine.
Is that the same garage that we want to store the watering equipment in over winter?
Yes. I'm not sure how much space.
No, I'm not sure how much space there'll be once we've got all watering equipment in there as well. There's probably, if there's only a few spades and a few forks or what, I don't know. I know they've applied for a grant for something, but I don't know. I haven't a clue what it is. The only thing I do have a concern about, and we'll have to work round it, is in order to keep our insurance policies down, which for a council can be astronomical, we have to have a policy which is like a municipal policy, which is basically specifically for councils. And one of the things you cannot do on a municipal policy, and that's probably one of the reasons why you do get it a lot cheaper, is you can only insure on that policy something that the council owns at your own assets. You can't have it covering someone else's equipment. So if there were room in there to get whatever they want to keep in there, that's one issue. But if there were room, I think they would have to put it in there on the proviso that they accepted that it was at their risk. Because our insurance, with it being municipal, won't cover someone else's equipment. And obviously, they can't sign the ownership of that equipment over to us because it'll invalidate the loan.
The other bit that could be considered, Gina's going to kick with this, we are looking at obviously those garages that need some work on them. You've just said about renting out shed space. You could consider offering them to put a small shed next to the garages that they could use for a minimal, just a thought.
Do we know
Okay.
what it is they do? We're just wasting,
We don't know what they put in there, no.
10 minutes.
Item 11. Town hall maintenance, apart from boiler and roof.
That's me again. Oh yeah.
There is. So as everyone can see, we currently have scaffolding up. We're getting the windows painted. That is partially grant funded. Getting it done. It's not a quick process because of our lovely weather at the moment, but it is being done and it is going to be inspected before it's all signed off. The other bit is the pointing has now been done on the roof where we had the leak in the office. The plasterer is due soon, I think next week, because we've had the dehumidifiers in and drying it out, and it is substantially drier than it was. They're doing readings every week to check where they're at. Then we will be moving on with the internal works on that. And I think those are the current maintenance projects that we are on. Oh, the clock, thank you. So yes, the clock has packed in. So as everyone should be aware, or I think everyone's aware, at Christmas, the auto winders went kaput. That is a very technical term on it. We managed to put in a temporary repair after authorising the work for the new auto winders and everything like that. We are now in a position where the parts have finally got here from, I believe some of them had to come from Italy, and we had, or the contractors have had slight hiccups with Brexit to get the stuff across here, which slightly delayed it. He was due to come in and start fitting very shortly. Unfortunately, he has had 2 bouts of forced isolation, courtesy of COVID, so he's running slightly behind. However, he is trying to schedule it in as soon as he can. He has assured me it will be before the new year. It's just he needs 2 solid weeks to do it. So I'm hoping in the next month, but I'm not going to promise you something that I can't guarantee. So it is something we're looking at, it is something we are trying to get done. COVID and Brexit have really been our friends this year, you know. But I can say he has now got the parts.
The previous auto winder were a bloke called Bill, and he used to run up them stairs twice a day. Because it's only a 12-hour wind on it.
Is there any other questions on the maintenance?
So we can take it that as regards the clock, that's in hand. Yeah, right. Can we move on to item 12? Town Hall heating system, which I think we've done. Haven't we?
Yeah.
We've touched on it. Yeah.
Quick update. I am meeting with another contractor this week to have a look at the system, because what it is the easiest way to explain it is the boilers keep packing in, and the brains behind it that tell them when they should be on and off sometimes has power, sometimes doesn't, sometimes decides it's going to work, sometimes doesn't. At the moment, the town hall boiler, for the heating for the town hall, you have two options, on or off. And on is sometimes pushing it. You might turn it on and it's not. So I've had one contractor out already. I have another one coming this week. We are looking at various schemes and funding for it, as well as we may have found an external funding source. But until I meet with them this week, that's about where we're at.
Any indication on?
I had an original cost, but there is a funding pot that we've been made aware of. The first estimate was about 80,000 because you've got 3 commercial boilers. However, I'm hoping that towards the end of this week, I may be able to say that that will be less. I don't know until I have this meeting, if that makes sense.
It was more than that.
80.
But surely if we can get this, whatever funding grant thing is called, I forget its name, that should reduce that. Yeah.
Well, it will, but we don't know by how much. The funding, it's like a lot of government funding, it's a bit complicated and you have to jump over backwards several times to get anything out of it. To qualify for it, your boiler needs to be of a certain age, which ours qualifies. It needs to be clapped out, which our boilers qualify. It needs to be in imminent need of repair. And then you start qualifying then for the grant. But you've got to pay, I think, most of the cost of the boiler. The grant is for additional things that are sort of environmentally friendly. And that's where the additionality comes from. You've basically still got to pay for your boiler replacements, but you get a bee's knees job and all sorts of extras with it. So it's probably still worth going for it, because you'll get all sorts of things included in with it that's probably going to save you a lot of money on running costs. So it's certainly worth going for it.
Is that the decarbonisation one?
Yes.
Sarah said?
Yes.
Yes. As you say, it's a match thing. So it's almost like I was going to have a gas boiler that costs 50,000, but if I do something decarbonising,
Yeah, they'll pay for that.
they'll pay the extra. Yes.
Yeah, that's where it is, yeah.
So I know the application deadline is quite narrow, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is.
Yeah, 6th of October to the 3rd of November. Okay.
Well, one of the guys who's contacted us, who does deal with that sort of thing, is actually coming in, is it Thursday,
Right.
to see...
Oh, the man from Blackburn, whatever. Yeah,
No,
different one.
that's all.
That one. Right.
Yes.
Okay. So are we looking at a different technology then? Are we looking at air source pumps, etc.?
Until he comes in with his mechanical and electrical specialist, I can't tell you what we can do and can't do, because part of it, this building has more radiators different style radiators, all that. I mean, one of the big things is you can look at building management systems that are a bit clever and can figure out this room's too hot, but that one's too cold. It's things like that that we could enhance the system, which long term would save us gas, electricity, all that. So, but until they come in and we're literally doing top to toe on the building. That's why I sound a bit vague, because until I've had that meeting, I just...
One of our problems is you can't even control most of our radiators with a radiator start, because the pipes are so big, they're all nearly all 2-inch bore. And the pipe work actually holds more hot water than what the radiators do. So if you turn the radiator off, the pipes are still hot anyway. And ideally it should all be on microbore. But it's not. But that might be something that they might pray for. Yep.
There is some zones-ish. It's quite an old system. I think I'll leave it at that.
So only thing I can suggest with that we'll wait until this guy's been to see Naomi, and then he'll probably want a few days to put some sort of a report together from what he's seen, to let Naomi have a rough idea what we need. But we do need to get something in if we're putting a bid in before this deadline.
I'm going to say, because the deadline's the 3rd of November, isn't it?
Yes, and
So
it didn't
therefore
start until 4th of October.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, sorry.
But it is fine. It is money that's for next financial year and the one after. Yes. So we're not going to run out of time that way, but we might be pushing it to get the bid in. But we do seriously need to get it.
Yeah. If push comes to shove, it is something that David could always call an extraordinary FES. Not that you want an extra late meeting, but it is. If it was that it's going to cost us X amount to do it, and it's over and above what we're able to do, that is an option if it needs to come back. Depends how much it is. Yeah, quite possibly. But it might be that we need it sooner than the full council, because if I'm going to push to get it sorted.
We could aim on taking it to the 19th, come to full council, which is the normal one.
That'll be my aim.
We could do that.
It's just whether he could then turn it round between the 20th and the... I don't know how long they would need.
Talk to him on Thursday.
That's my plan.
If we need an extra meeting, we'll have one. If not,
I'll take it to full council.
We'll sort it on 19th. Okay, everyone happy with that? Item 13, items for a future month's agenda. No? Well, there's nothing to stop us discussing it, but we did say we wouldn't discuss it with Pendle until they had transferred all the allotments. And up to now, they've only transferred one. Two.
It's classed as 2.
Oh, yeah, well, it's one. Yeah, it's one. Right, the date and the time of the next meeting is the 2nd of November. Well, can I thank you all for attending and close the meeting?